Hello and a warm welcome to Federal Special Program Capital Beat. India's diplomatic blitz to isolate Pakistan has suffered a body blow, with the top US general praising Islamabad's counter-terror record as phenomenal. General Michael Kurilla, the US commander for the Middle East and Central Asia and South Asia, Centcom, told the lawmakers this week that Pakistan has been a phenomenal partner in America's counter-terrorism fight. And this, of course, is a ringing endorsement which undercuts New Delhi's anti Pakistan pitch, just as an Indian parliamentary delegation has almost wound up the multi party delegation trip, which was headed by Shashi Tharoor. And now there are reports coming in of the Pakistani chief, a Pakistani army chief, Asim Munir, that probably he would be attending the military parade, which is going to be held on 14th of June in America. Now, is this the biggest snub which India has received? Is it one of the diplomatic failures? And has India really hit a diplomatic wall when it comes to handling this? Joining me now is Dr. Aftab Kamal Pasha, International Affairs expert and diplomat. Thank you, sir, so much for joining. Sanjay Kapoor, International Affairs expert, veteran journalist, and author. Thank you so much for joining. And I'll begin with Dr. Pasha. Dr. Pasha, how would you really see both these things? First of all, the CENTCOM chief, Michael Kurilla, saying that Pakistan is a phenomenal partner in America's counterterrorism fight. And then now there are reports that Asim Munir will be attending the military parade. What does this mean for India?
You said you have to see this in the backdrop of two things. One is the relative American decline in international affairs because of its economic problems. Starting with Trump's assumption that NATO, America and NATO will have to have different relations, especially over spending. And secondly, America's attempt to disassociate itself from Ukraine and to hand over the Ukraine fight to the Europeans. Thirdly, its inability to contain China has been a major botheration, not only for Trump, but also for the deep state, which has engaged in this anti-China for quite some time, from the Hong Kong, Taiwan, Uyghur, and various other issues. You see, the United States creates fertile ground for terrorism like it did in Afghanistan, using Mujahideen and Saudi money and jihadi fighters and Pakistani mercenary assistance to expel the Soviet Union. And then all these Mujahideen, jihadis were allowed to go back and create mayhem in all of these countries from where they came, especially in the West Asian and North African Sahel countries. Then the invasion of Iraq led to the emergence of Islamic State. They decimated the Baath Party, the military, the infrastructure, so on and so forth. So the Americans have this unique privilege of creating fertile ground for terrorism, then allowing terrorist groups to operate, and then launch war on terror and war on ISIS and so on and so forth. Whenever it is useful, they use it against their enemies, whether it is Russia or China or uh, Syria's Bashar al-Assad or Gaddafi or any of these things. So now Pakistan has re-emerged in American strategic calculation as a reliable partner, especially the military and ISIS, because of their inability to contain China through sanctions, through Ukraine, through all of the military steps they took. And they think that because of Pakistan's relations with China, they can use Pakistan also as a twin pillar strategy to contain Russia and China. I am forgetting the fact that the terrorism which India has been facing, cross-border terrorism, we have been shouting at the top of the voice all over the world, but the Americans have been neutralizing it. Now, after Operation Sindoor, we have realized that America is taking credit from this Operation Sindoor, and it is rewarding our enemy, whether it is in IMF or ADB or World Bank or UN Security Council, and now elevating Asim Munir to a sort of head of state to come and attend the Flag Day or the Army Day or Trump's birthday on Saturday. This is an open challenge along with the Central Command General Kurilla, who, in a very unusual language in the Senate Armed Forces Committee questioning, he used the word phenomenal partner in tackling ISIS Khorasan. Now, who created this Khorasan? It is all the Americans who trained them in their fight against the Soviets. And they still continue to operate in Khorasan, and that was used to weaken Iran. Khorasan is in Iran and Afghanistan border. So these kind of attempts by the United States, have been repeatedly used from the Sahel countries, from the territory of Libya, and then training the ISIS in Libya and sending them to Syria, and from Iraq to elsewhere, Chechnya, Dagestan, so on and so forth. So this tells us about the real American plans, because now the Americans are stuck in Ukraine with Russia and no headway, even in trade talks, which they had to agree with China on their terms. So now they are preparing Pakistan as a launching pad for their activities against China and Russia. And I will not be surprised if Ziaul Haq is repeated on Asim Munir, that the weak and vulnerable civilian Pakistani government is dislodged, and Asim Munir takes over as the strongman, as Ayub Khan did, or Yahya Khan did, or General Musharraf. All these generals have been used by the United States in the Cold War, but ultimately we were victims of aggression from Pakistan. Ayub Khan launched the 65 war, and Yahya Khan launched the 75 war, and Musharraf launched the Kargil attack, and we had Ziaul Haq creating mayhem in Afghanistan, which impacted our Kashmir, and much of the cross-border terrorism arose from that. So if you take a historical overview, this invitation is not an ordinary invitation, and it has larger implications for not only our national security, but for our neighborhood policy and larger Indo-US relations, as to what we should make of this, and how we should view the relationship with the United States, because it is becoming a burden for our country, that we take it as strategic partnership, and we grant all the facilities, and we go out of the way to befriend the United States. But it continues to sanction our companies. It continues to put pressure on zero tariff. It continues to interfere in the name of bringing ceasefire on Kashmir, and it continues to reward our enemy, and it continues to put pressure on us to not to buy weapons from Russia or not to trade with China. So, in balance, I feel that this invitation is not out of the blue, but it has a deeper and longer and more damaging implications on us and our regional policy. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, Sanjay, if you look at General Kurilla's statement, he just not only says that we need both India and Pakistan, but he also has fulsome praise for Pakistan and the kind of words he uses. Now, will you see this as a diplomatic setback for India? Or you think that what America is doing is absolutely right? Or are we expecting America? Are we expecting from America too much? Because many would say that what America is doing, I think in its own capacity, maybe that they feel that they are wrong, because they need both partners. For America to keep Pakistan is equally important by their side because of all what is happening in Middle East. So they know that they have to keep Pakistan also very happy.
We must recognize that India has been a collaterally we have got damaged because of gross miscalculation about the ties between US and Pakistan. We thought that we can talk about terror and we in a way Pakistan, US from Pakistan's hold, but their ties are far deeper, and they have far longer, you can say, relationship than we can ever imagine. And with coming back of Trump, that relationship has been reiterated time once again. When Mr. Biden was in power, he was uh, not paying much attention to Mr. to Pakistan, and India was very confident that something like. But now there have been number of social media posts about how Biden and his contribution to the U.S. Army has been criticized, and recently there was coming together of U.S. Army troops, and they were being talked of at the time. They were talking of how U.S. used to handle major issues with the world, and they were all very critical of Mr. Biden and praising Mr. Trump, because I think what has really happened now is that U.S. has taken a rightward turn, not just in terms of the polity and the government, but also in the army. Something very similar to what we've seen in our own country, that the army has taken a very significant turn to the right. It's no longer how it used to be in the past. So, in a certain way, if you look at it, this is a phenomena which is visible in many parts of the world. And with Mr. Trump coming to power and talking about China in this manner, it is very clear that US and China have gone back to the days when they used to hyphenate India with Pakistan. And Pakistan is, in the reckoning of Mr. Trump, a far more important country, because what has happened now is that India decided to convince Pakistan, convince China, US for that matter, that the terror attack that took place uh, in Pahalgam required a similar kind of application and criticism as it has happened in the past. But US doesn't really countenance terror attacks in the same manner as India does. Because if you remember, before 9/11, uh, US was most lackadaisical about whatever was happening in India. And despite the fact that India was ravaged and devastated by terror attacks from across the border, but US never paid any attention. Same thing is tragically happening now. I can recount with you details of some of the feedback that some of the representatives of various political parties received when they were part of a delegation which went to uh, Southeast Asia. And there were many others that went to different parts of the world, like Mr. Tarur leading something to US and Guyana and Panama and Colombia and other places. And there were others that went to Africa. But there's one particular one which went to Southeast Asia. And they came back with the impression that India was being asked very tough questions on why did the attack took place and why were we doing so many different things that required conversation rather than a war or something like that. In fact, they felt, many of the MPs, that the sympathy in a certain way resided with the Pakistanis, because people were asking our counterparts in other countries, asking questions why we decided to stop water, whether from a treaty which is very well established. And this was a 60-year-old treaty where we continued to provide share water, and suddenly it has been stopped. So, these were questions that are unsettling, although India has a very strong case in a certain way. But there has been, I think, there should have been some kind of rethink. India should have sent delegations before resorting to using the army or resorting to attack on Pakistan. They should have sent delegates to different parts of the world and told them that it's becoming very difficult to hold our hand. We need to attack them. Operation Sindoor will follow soon. But we wanted to convince the Pakistanis, convince the Americans, convince the Chinese, everybody that you cannot do what you're doing for so long. So, in my reckoning, it's a very tricky moment with US not really getting convinced and doing pretty much what India doesn't want to hear or see. And it's a situation where India doesn't have support now. We don't have the Chinese backing us. We don't even have a best friend Russians backing us. Russia is speaking the same language as Chinese. Russia wants India to converse with the Pakistanis, get down talking with them. I mean, this is something that hurts us, because nobody is willing to hear a point of view and say that, look here, Uh, we can't talk with the country which providing support to terrorists. Terror and talks can't go together. That has been a consistent line. But now Russia is saying that, China is saying that, and US is also not ours. In fact, I would not be surprised that in the coming days you have Mr. Trump coming up with another statement that he is willing to not only mediate but he'll broker talks between India and Pakistan very soon.
Right. Now let me come to Professor Pasha. If backstage people can hear me, Pushpraj Deshpande has already joined. If you can admit him, please, on the screen. Uh, I don't know if anybody is there at the backstage. Can you just admit Pushpraj? But in the meanwhile, I'll just go to Professor Pasha. Uh, Professor Pasha, if you have seen what, yeah, I think Pushpraj is there. Okay, so let me go to Pushpraj. Hi, Pushpraj. Thank you so much for joining. Pushpaj also follows diplomacy very, very closely, and he's the author of the book called Bharat Jodo Yatra, works closely with the India Alliance as well. Pushpraj, now coming to you, because we've had Dr. Pasha and Sanjay Kapoor speaking to us on this issue. But what I wanted to ask you now is that India has been lobbying very hard to have Pakistan blacklisted as a state sponsor of terror, and they've tried hard to shun Pakistan. We've had a multi-party delegation doing that job all across, and now when General Kurilla says a thing like this, that it's important to have India and Pakistan both on its sides, and and Pakistan is a phenomenal partner. Is this now like a stunning reality check for New Delhi as far as its foreign policy is concerned?
Hi, Niluji. My apologies for being late. Good afternoon to you, our panelists, and of course, our viewers. See, I think that we need to be very careful in analyzing what has happened. One is that while keeping aside the optics, going beyond the symbolic and actually looking at the substantive, while the Modi government would claim that this all party delegation has been successful, we need to contextualize the fact that almost no delegation was met by any head of state or by any substantive serious thinker on foreign policy. The kind of questioning that they've had to face includes primarily two things. One, do you have any empirical proof on whether Pakistan was behind the attack in Pahalgam, which is something that we have not been able to furnish. And two, why have you held Pakistan hostage with regard to the Indus Water Treaty? Now, these are questions that our delegation should have been prepared to answer. Instead of making that case, what we have basically done is leverage those visits to pander to home audiences, because if you see the speeches that have come out, it's primarily us, our delegates, our MPs talking to the Indian diaspora, who really don't serve as ambassadors. That is the first point. The second thing is, globally, what has happened is, compare this situation to what happened after the Mumbai attacks in 2006. At that time, Dr. Manmohan Singh, the UPA government, marshaled world opinion against them. They exercised considerable restraint and were able to prove to the world that Pakistan was behind what was happening. And frankly speaking, India was much better placed at that time. And if you remember, that also had a spillover effect on how India's perception, how India was perceived at that time. Right up till 2013, 2014, India was being compared to China. The world was saying that we are a democratic counter to China, not just economically, but possibly also militarily. Now, and the Indian diaspora was viewed as smart. When you thought of the Indian diaspora, what it was synonymous was smart, techie, academic businessman. Today, that has taken a 180-degree turn. Today, we are being compared to Pakistan, which is a flailing state. And this is a historic reversion in the last 75 years. Our economy is 10 times their size. Our military is double their size. Our country was dominating South Asia. If we have now gone back from 2014 to this situation today, there has been a historic regression in terms of what we have done. And to a large extent, this is because of the foreign policy failures of the last 11 years, for which the Modi government must take account. Now, look at America's case. And I don't know what Professor Pasha and Sanjay sir have said, but I'm fairly certain they must have spoken about how Russia, our strategic ally, is now siding with China and Pakistan on one hand, how our Prime Minister and India has not had any bilateral conversation with them since 2022, bilateral summit, sorry, not conversation, since 2022. How we have stopped importing weapons from Russia and are now dependent on US. That's Russia there. Our neighborhood is completely alienated. We are alienated from our neighborhood. Nepal is asking for our land. Bangladesh threatening to cut off chicken's neck. Sri Lanka is completely dependent economically on China. Maldives has said, I forget the campaign, but basically they asked our army to leave, and so on and so forth. So, and of course, Pakistan. China, of course, has captured land in Ladakh and Arunachal. Plus, we have a 99 billion trade deficit with China. We're completely isolated in our neighborhood. So, what our foreign policy, our EAM has done, what our Modi government's foreign policy has done, is put us squarely in the American sphere of influence, shedding traditional non-alignment and enlightened self-interest, strategic self-interest, which is a historic blunder. Because consider this: President Trump did not invite Prime Minister Modi to his inauguration. He has internationalized the Kashmir issue, something no prime minister or no government since independence has allowed. He has also refused to sign a trade deal with India despite multiple requests from the Modi government, and they keep pushing the can further down the road. Plus, our Indian diasporas are shoved into military planes, handcuffed, and including that Haryana boys incident, man's incidents a few days ago, like cattle. But Modi government is quiet. Despite our efforts to isolate and alienate Pakistan, the United States, China, and Russia worked together to ensure that the IMF, World Bank, and the ADB delivered nearly a $44 billion package to Pakistan. Now, UN, in the UN, Pakistan has got important chairmanships, and on top of that, we wanted to make the case that Pakistan is importing terror into India. This is something that every Indian knows. Yet today, the narrative, the global narrative, is something that General Michael Kurilla, who is the Central Command's, the U.S. Central Command's commander, he said that Pakistan is closely working with the U.S. in curbing terrorism. Now, I don't understand, how is it that in 2014, when the UPA government demitted office, Pakistan is isolated, alienated, India is on the upswing, seen as a democratic counter to China. Something has gone wrong in the last 11 years. Yet our foreign policy establishment, which is some of it is for hire by the BJP, the BJP's entire ecosystem, the Gode media are constantly telling us that America is entirely dependent on India for the Quad, which is not the case, and that Pakistan is alienated. Here we have the situation where Pakistan is not just being praised, it is being supported, it is being empowered. There is no bigger testament to Prime Minister Modi, Dr. Jaishankar, and NSA Doval's foreign policy and geopolitical failures than what our situation is today in the world.
Right. So now, Dr. Pasha, very briefly for the second round of questions to all the three of you, I'll come to you first, Dr. Pasha, that what can India do now? Let's talk about solutions. Of course, whatever deadlock we are seeing in the situation, Prime Minister has not spoken. We don't see the foreign minister also doing enough of talking. But now that we are seeing the things on the face of what is happening, how America is treating India at the moment, whether it is not mediating on the ceasefire and then all the proclamations made by America, what can India do now? That's what I want to understand. What should be the reaction from the Indian side, from New Delhi?
Yeah, I want to start with the famous quote. I've been using it for quite some time in both my TV interviews and in my writings. And that is what the former Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, told Narendra Modi when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat during the Gujarat issue, that we should not do things domestically which will make us lower our head in front of the global nations. We should follow a policy of inclusive growth and not alienate any group which is part and parcel of India. You see, the leverage which the United States has over India is because of our skewed and exclusive policies of the BJP, especially the RSS guided agenda which has led to aggressive policies abroad against Khalistanis by the Home Minister, by allowing the congressional report to indict BJP's involvement in the last parliamentary elections and accusing them of anti-Muslim speeches, hatred, and calling for sanctions against India. And also, this Adani thing is also linked to what the Prime Minister has been doing domestically. They feel that since they have succeeded in their lynching policy or bulldozing policy or anti-minority policy, they can go gongo in foreign policy also and do whatever they want, whether it is using Hindutva groups in London or Canada or America or elsewhere, which has led to these countries, liberal democracies question what is the agenda of India, and this has put us at the back foot. And you see, and more importantly, we blindly believed, as Sanjay Kapoor very ably has pointed out, that we had succeeded in convincing the United States that Pakistan is responsible for cross-border terrorism. It is our enemy, and it is doing harm, and so on and so forth. So, under this cloak, the United States was appearing as a friend to India and extracting all the details and keeping its links with the military and ISI intact. And at the opportune moment, now during Operation Sindoor, now they're shown the true colors of praising Pakistan, the leadership, the military, and now rewarding the military. And so much so, a veteran five-star general to speak in front of the Senate Armed Forces Committee in praise of Pakistan, and the fact that Asim Munir spoke to him immediately after he took over as army chief shows the close bondage between the militaries, and also the Turkish military is behaving in the same manner. The government of India thought that Turkey also is on our side for various reasons, and all these countries have shown. And I may also add here that you see countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Bahrain, with which Prime Minister Modi has signed strategic and defense cooperation agreement, and who has received the highest civilian award. These countries also intervened on behalf of Pakistan with the United States, and they continue to give financial assistance, and they continue to host Pakistani military advisors there. There has not been an iota of change. It is only lip service that these Gulf states have shown by allotting some land for a building of temple and promising 70 billion more. But none of these promises have really seen the light of the day. It is all they have taken us for a ride. The Prime Minister has been so enamored by addressing the NRIs in stadiums in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Saudi, in UAE, and all. He thought he has won over the entire nations there in the Gulf to our side. And this is, living in a fool's paradise. Now the reality has struck us, and America has shown its true colors. And in the process, what the Americans wanted, what these nations, you see, I must also add here that these Gulf states are nothing but client states. You see, one author called them as tribes with flags. The British gave flags to these countries, and they are nothing but puppets. You remember the first term of Trump after visiting Riyadh, and where he addressed the GCC and OIC summit leaders. After going back within a week, he said Saudi monarchy will collapse if America doesn't support even for a week. So how weak they are, and vulnerable and dependent on the Americans, you can see, and the Americans use it for their strategic purposes. So we have to review our. In the process, the Americans have weakened our links with Russia, with our global South, with Iran, with even China, so on, in BRICS countries, so on and so forth. So the Americans have slowly achieved their goal. By hoodwinking our prime minister, and our foreign minister has been completely taken for a ride. So that's why I hold the foreign minister squarely responsible for misguiding the Prime Minister, who is not an expert on foreign policy. He relies on these people who have been in the embassy, in the MEA for decades, and now they have taken us down the road to face
Right.
this kind of situation. So, as
Right.
I said, my only 2 point solution is we have to correct our domestic policy, restore the secular approach without alienating the minorities, and that will reflect the strength, because the strength of a country's foreign policy lies in its domestic policy. I always teach my students how strong a country can be once we follow the correct domestic policy. The domestic roots should be
Right.
strong
Right.
to pursue
All
an
right.
independent foreign policy. Yeah.
All right. I'll come to you, Sanjay, now. That what do you think? I mean, is India going to object to Asim Munir attending the military parade, or will they do it, or will they keep quiet still? And probably because Prime Minister is also attending the G7 summit, which is starting in Canada from 15th to 17th of June. So, does it land India in a very tricky kind of a situation where Donald Trump is going to be present? Will Prime Minister talk to him about these things? What can really happen? How is India going to object to this?
I didn't get your question, but I will just build on what Professor Pasha said. I entirely agree with him that in a crisis, you have to test your policies whether they work or not. The crisis that we created post Pulwama, this Pahalgam attack, was one where we needed to find out who's our friend, who's not. And much of the response we got was not only for what we were saying, but also about our conduct in the past and our policies, domestic policies, as Professor Pasha was reiterating, and I also believe in it, is that the message has gone around that we're not taking everybody along. It is not sabka saath, sabka vikas, and that is where it has begun to bite and hurt quite a bit. So if we had taken everybody along, we would not have a reason for us to distance ourselves from Azerbaijan and Turkey and this and that. I mean, you look at the way how we have been eliminating countries which have done business with, that know that these people stood with Pakistan. How can they dare give up India if India is true to them? So I think there has been some major need for a course correction. Prime Minister Modi should sit with his foreign policy group. I'm sure he has greater sense now than what he had when he had come over in 2014 in terms of foreign policy. He has traveled to so many countries. He knows exactly what stands where. And I think there's a need for course correction because the feedback many of the delegates may have given to Prime Minister Modi would also be a very objective view of what is happening, because I'm sure they would not do the same kind of backslapping and applauding that the BJP members may be doing, but they may bring in a greater amount of objectivity because you have the Congress member, you have people from the left who had also visited, and they will surely tell what exactly the world is thinking about our policy to do away with the Indus River Water Treaty, or for that matter, uh, you know, the entire operation that has taken place against Pakistan. So all that will be considered, and I think there's a need to be far more objective about what is good and what is bad for us, and that is going to serve our national interests rather than anything else.
Right. Okay. So, Prithviraj, how would you really summarize this whole thing? And what I was asking Sanjay also was that 15th to 17th of June, we have a G7 summit, which will be attended by the Prime Minister. Donald Trump will also go for that summit. How are we going to see the things unfolding? I really don't know because India hasn't objected
Yeah,
so
tell
far.
me.
Sanjay, can you mute yourself, Sanjay? Yeah. All right. Okay. So, how is India really going to object in this kind of a situation? And will Prime Minister Modi ever raise this issue with Donald Trump?
I sincerely doubt that there is any going to be any kind of confrontation from the prime minister. If the last 11 years are taken as a case study of what he and his government are expected to do, it is very likely that at the lower level, bureaucratic level, there might be some mild, polite protest. but there's not going to be any, as he said in Hindi, la lag dikhana. There is not going to be any kind of strident championing of national interests or sovereignty. No, absolutely not. I mean, look at what happened after Galwan. Look at what happened after Ladakh or in Arunachal. It's just odd with the cases of those Indians being deported like cattle in a military plane. Nothing. I mean, I mean, Rahul Gandhi has appropriately characterized this as surrender, Narendra. Now, the point is, with all due respect and deference to the Prime Minister, he is, after all, our Prime Minister. I don't think his foreign policy is best suited for India's our national interest at this current juncture. His government has consistently compromised our national interest in multiple ways. Today, we are actually uniquely poised to take advantage of the geopolitical disruptions and tensions that are happening, not just the economic disruptions, but also geopolitical disruptions. Unfortunately, what the Prime Minister is busy doing is weaponizing the Indian diaspora to support the right-wing parties and establishing a lasting global far-right movement. That is what his primary interest is, whether it was in Leicester, whether it was in Washington, whether it was in, as Professor Pasha said, in the Middle East. That is his primary interest, to be some kind of campaigning a party that is going to help far right parties, whether it's the Tory parties. And I know this for a fact from first-hand example. When when an India Party delegation which we had organized went to the UK, there was a whip issued by the then Home Secretary from the Tory government to not meet with the India parties at a direct request from the BJP government. This kind of diplomacy, this kind of policy to work exclusively with right-wing parties is damaging to the national interest. The same thing happened in Bangladesh. You dealt exclusively with the Awami.
Sanjay, can you mute yourself, please? Sorry. Yeah. Pushpraj. Just gonna,
Sorry. So we dealt exclusively with one party in Bangladesh, not with the other. Now we're completely at odds with that party. Same thing that is happening in Nepal. Same thing that is happening in Maldives. This kind of politics is very, very detrimental to India's national interest. Not to mention this entire thing that the Chief Minister of Assam is doing, calling Muslims as Bangladeshi termites and blah, blah. It has seriously damaged our interest with Bangladesh. So the fact of the matter is, as Professor Pasha is saying, as Sanjay sir is saying, there is a direct impact from the BJP's domestic politics into the international sphere. The world is watching us. And every time the government of India derides international reports, derides criticism, fabricates data, causes up with right-wing parties, weaponizes the Indian diaspora to crowd out progressive voices, and of course does this anti-Muslim, anti-progressive value rhetoric, it is going to have an impact. You are isolated. You are isolated only because of them. And this is one last thing I'll try to just end with. At this juncture, the India bloc has an opportunity to pose an alternative foreign policy blueprint to the nation. There is a way forward. You can mend fences with China. You need to mend fences with Russia. You need to take your neighborhood back into your control. When I say control, I don't mean control, but you need to at least have a sphere of influence in the South Asia, and you need to be able to play the US and China against each other and maximize your strategic self-interest. You are not being able to do that because you are blinkered by your ideological proclivities. That is what is hamstringing our national interest. The BJP's ideological proclivities and its inability to think for the nation and not for itself.
absolutely. And it'll be interesting to watch as to what happens on 14th.
No, just 1 minute.
Very briefly, Dr. Pasha, because we're running.
You see, India has enormous leverage, not only over the United States in terms of the trade opportunities we can offer, but also you see our image in the global South has not been utterly damaged. So we can retrieve our position. And I don't see any reason why we have to be so spineless like this government is.
Right. So we'll have to wait and watch how things unfold. I'll have to end the program here. Thank you so much, Dr. Pasha, Sanjay, Pushpraj. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you.